Brenda. I lost my son. I lost my son to the war. A war that should never have happened. A war started by men who had a need for power where their heart should have been. Shame on them. My son had been everything to me, everything. His father had died when he was just an infant, just a tiny child. He had no memories of his father, but I was able to supply him from the richness of mine. My son, my darling boy, joined the RAF. I was so proud but fearful. Dreadfully fearful that he might meet an untimely end. I would often ask him to remember his prayers. He would laugh and say, "Mother, don't worry so. I pray in my own way. I don't want to tempt fate." When he was a small boy, we would kneel by his bed together and he would ask God to keep his daddy safe in heaven and to keep us safe here on earth. I would always add a quiet word or two of my own, asking an angel to watch over my lovely boy. I carried on doing that for years and years. In fact, when he joined up and went away to train and then to fight, I was doubling up on prayers several times a day. I would hear from him now and then. He couldn't say what he was doing or even where he was sometimes, but I'd be content knowing he was safe for another few days. But then the news I had always been dreading. My boy, my precious, precious boy, had been shot down. I was in terrible distress and shock for days. I didn't wash, didn't go out. I avoided callers. Such distress, such anger, such terrible, terrible, agonizing pain. I shut myself away from humanity. I didn't want to know life was continuing when my boy was dead. I didn't want to think, certainly didn't eat, and briefly sought solace in alcohol. I wanted to be free of this crucifying pain. I wanted it to be a lie, a dreadful, unspeakable lie. Surely, I thought, he must be coming home. He can't be dead, not my boy. Not my boy, so vibrant and so youthful. His life couldn't be snuffed out so quickly, so harshly. And then I would look again at the telegram and I would know it was true. I could not cope with the pain. It was too much for one body to bear. How, I wondered, was a person ever to stand upright again, carrying such a weight of despair? Gradually, people began to filter back into the ruins of my life. Kindly people, but their company was no comfort to me. Their expressions of sorrow only heightened my own, and the crying would begin again. I told no one of my plan to join my son and his father, whom I had loved very much. I coped with his death because of my son. That reason wasn't there anymore. I didn't have to live. I had nothing left to live for. He had no funeral, my son. A memorial service, but no funeral. The sea had swallowed the remains of him and his plane, pulling them down to the ocean floor, resisting my need for a fitting resting place. I was angry about that. I had wanted him under the chestnut tree in the churchyard beside his father, but that was denied us both. I was filled with a consuming need to be with my husband and son. I willed myself to die, Every day I prayed to the Lord to take my soul, to take me out of that life. I willed it with every breath. I found I didn't have the courage to kill myself. I tried several times, but the fear of messing it all up always stopped me at the brink. Life eventually improved. After a long time, I could mention my son without weeping. I could look at his photograph without sinking to my knees and howling at the sheer agony of loss. I emerged from 2 years of unremitting sadness and pain a different woman. I know I was. I felt different inside and out. Grief changes you. Real, raw grief leaves a scar on your soul. You live with it because over time it becomes a scar instead of the open wound it was. But you are forever changed. My health began to fail, and in truth, I welcomed this. I still had days when I ached for the loss of my husband and son, days when I longed for their cheerful company. I began to dream of my son. Sleep was my escape. In my dreams, he would always be smiling and waving, always at a distance, walking away from me, but turning and waving just before he vanished from view. Sometimes his father was with him, his arm around his shoulders, proud and laughing. I would wake, my face wet with tears, but having seen them, I would gather the courage to begin another day. My faith, such as it was, sustained me. I would ask the angels to watch over my husband and son, and that when my time came, I might join them. I died in my bed. The house took a direct hit, blown to smithereens. All that was left was rubble and dust. I had gone to my bed that night having said my usual prayers. I always talked to my boy and his father just before going to sleep. I would tell them about my day, tell them that I love them. That night was no different in that way, but I did feel a sense of expectancy. I put this down to the probability of another bombing raid and thought no more about it. Death didn't frighten me, I welcomed it. I don't recall hearing the sirens, I don't recall anything at all from that night, except that when I opened my eyes I could scarcely believe what I was seeing. "Hello, Mother," he said, smiling that lovely golden smile he had. "Hello, Mother. How are you feeling?" I said, "I can see you." He laughed and said, "Of course." "Oh, my boy," I cried, "I can see you. Am I dead? Am I really dead?" I couldn't believe it. I was dead. I was dead and I was with my boy. I cannot begin to describe the absolute joy in that moment. The absolute joy. "There's someone else here," he said. "Someone else to welcome you." He swept out his arm, and there they were, side by side, the two men who had been the love of my life, for all of my life.